Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes to wait for a few more folks to sign on. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the TBR Webinar series. Today, Practice Manager and Principal Analyst Patrick Heffernan will be discussing 30 minutes, 3 months, 3 years, evolution of digital transformation. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screens, you can access the slides, audio controls, Q&A, speaker bios, and our survey. After the webinar, you'll receive an email with a replay link, as well as a link to view and register for other TBR webinars. If you have any questions for us, please submit them via the Q&A widget in On24. You may also reach out to us after the event at webinars@tbri.com. Thank you again for joining us, and here's Patrick to begin the webinar.
Thank you very much. So what are we going to cover in 30 minutes? We're going to cover the last 3 months of my travel and our research around digital transformation, plus how it's evolved for us over the last 30 years. What I'm going to walk through is sort of how we see digital transformation, what we're seeing in digital transformation, how we cover it as a firm, and then what we're looking for next. And then once we finish that up, we'll tackle some Q&A. So you can see here, this is the evolution of our thinking around digital transformation. And to be honest, a few years ago when this term was being brought to the market increasingly by the consultancies and the IT services vendors that we pay our closest attention to, from my perspective, everything on the left side of the screen, substitution and even extension, was not really digital transformation. We sort of set the bar very high to say a company that hadn't undergone some kind of business model change really hadn't undergone a digital transformation. I think we've seen over the last few years, we've lowered that bar a bit. And in part because of the feedback we've gotten from, again, the consultancies and IT services vendors that we work with, when they talk about the way that clients are handling transformation within their own enterprises and how they're changing their own businesses, but maybe not in that dramatic transformative way. I think the best example I can use to illustrate that is a few years ago, a gentleman who was leading an IoT practice at one of the big consultancies told me all about a project they were doing in Poland where they were putting sensors on trucks and on garbage bins, and it was making a huge impact on the routes that the truck drivers were taking and the management of those trucks and sort of fleet management all the way around. When I heard that a few years ago, I thought to myself, well, it doesn't matter, you're still just picking up trash and taking it someplace, so it's not really changing the business model. I think now when I hear that kind of story, I think more about the ways that companies are gaining access to different kinds of data, the way that they're able to use the cost efficiencies that they save in changing their operations to actually fuel funds back into other kinds of ideas, innovations, other kinds of digital transformation. So when we look at this now, though, we do see that while there still is an awful lot of work on the far left side, on substitution, that's sort of some core IT services and implementation work that goes on. Really, the bulk of the activity right now is around the extension part of it. Although I do want to say that last bullet under substitution is really important, because while the improving efficiencies may be minimally transformative, improving efficiencies does give you seed money to fund the rest of the initiatives and the innovations that you have or you're trying to go through. So again, most of the work is taking place in extension, and then truly transformative engagements are a bit rare. We do hear about them from time to time. We do see where a lot of clients are going with their digital transformations, but it's not a whole lot of companies are completely changing their business model when it comes to digital transformation. So we've struggled for a while to come up with an analogy that we like. I still don't like this one, but it's what we got at the moment. This is our digital transformation restaurant, and the clients are there sitting at the table. The services vendors and the consultancies are providing them the menu and making recommendations on what tastes good this evening, and then the tech vendors are back in the kitchen. But what's maybe most important to understand about us and why we're sticking with this imperfect analogy is that what's on that menu is all the things that TBR looks at. So we dive deep on all the different vendors and how they bring these different things to the market. We're looking at sort of we're looking at very explicitly at the business side of cloud, of artificial intelligence, of digital marketing services, of IoT. Because for us, it's important to understand how what's on that menu, what's actually being delivered to clients, is what is really truly the digital transformation that's happening. And again, when we look at all of those distinct areas, we're looking at them in the broader context of digital transformation. So it's not simply cloud in a silo of a cloud practice. It's cloud within the context of a larger digital transformation initiative as a firm or as an offering, but then also as an engagement for the enterprises. So then if we take a look at some of the stuff we've written recently, everything you see here is available on our website. These are all the special reports and event perspectives that we put out after we travel. I mentioned 3 months worth of travel. It's actually been 7 trips in the last 9 weeks alone, and we've been visiting with a lot of different IT services vendors and consultancies and hearing directly from them and directly from their clients what is happening around digital transformation broadly, but then what's also happening around some of the different key areas and key offerings for them. So 3 themes have come out from that. Customer Zero, the list here, Customer Zero, vertical use cases, and risk and startups. Customer Zero, if you're not familiar with that idea, it's basically that a lot of the IT services vendors and consultancies have been applying the digital transformation innovations and applying the emerging technologies to themselves first as a way of being able to demonstrate to their clients, this is what we can do, and we know we can do it because we did it to ourselves. I think the best example of this, of course, that we've seen is Accenture. They took MyWizard, which was a platform for automating their own engagements and their own service offerings, and they've rolled it out to MyConcerto, which is a way of accelerating a lot of their engagements and accelerating a lot of their clients through a transformation, particularly around sort of core ERP, the SAP migration to S4, all that. So I think the idea of Customer Zero really is, people say eat your own dog food, drink your own champagne, any way you want to phrase it. It's basically being able to use yourself as a use case when you're trying to engage your clients with something new. The vertical use cases, I think what's really come out in that, and there's been a definite shift towards an industry focus among all the consultancies and the IT services vendors that we follow, but what we've actually seen is a real division between 3 different kinds of vendors right now. You have some who have been aligned by and structured by organizationally and culturally industry for a long time or forever in their existence. So for those companies, a increasing market desire for industry-specific solutions or for industry-specific digital transformations, that's fully within their DNA. There's no need for an organizational change or a cultural change to meet that demand. Then you have some vendors who are being highly selective about which industries they want to play in, which industries they believe that they have something that differentiates enough, or they have the expertise, or they believe there's an opening for them to fill a market need around industry specialization. And here we're talking about going beyond the broad industry of energy and all the way down to utilities in a certain region, or oil and gas companies, or oil and gas services companies, that kind of idea. So for some vendors, they're making a very strategic and selective choice. And then there's a third category of vendors who are simply flailing, who are unable to either articulate clearly or at least make a strategic choice about which industries they're going to focus on. And so we hear an idea of, okay, we're going to become more industry aligned, and here are the 17 industries that we are focused on. No one can focus on 17 things at once, and we don't think any IT services vendor could actually align themselves by industry in such a wide way. So again, some companies are really taking this on quite well. Others we think are struggling, and then for others it's always been who they are. And then the last part around risk and startups. Risk has, in the last year, sort of crept back into a lot of conversations around digital transformation, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of them is a better understanding of and a better appreciation for the way that data is going to have to be captured and managed and stored and manipulated across enterprises. And as data becomes more pervasively used within a digital transformation engagement, risk becomes a more important element for an enterprise as a whole. So when you combine that with the, I guess you could say, traditional hype around startups as part of digital transformation, it seems like every mature IT services vendor or consultancy ensured that some part of their digital transformation offering included working with startups. When you fold those two things together, you see how important it is for consultancies and IT services vendors to play a role in, if it's not mitigating the risk of working with startups, it's certainly assuring clients that what's happening with the startups and what's happening in the startup community is both understood by the IT services vendor and then also folded into their own digital transformation in a way that can both scale and be secure. So a lot of these reports, again, you can see them on our website, and if you followed me and some of my colleagues, you'll know that we're behind. We've been to a few events that have not shown up yet here. We haven't been able to do all the special reports. That's a downside of traveling. So we do have some stuff coming up soon on SAP's big Sapphire event, and then Accenture's most recent Analyst event in San Francisco. So then we're going to dive a little bit now into some of the, and I apologize to anyone out there who thinks I'm talking really fast. I am, but I want to get through this quickly and get as much out to you as I can so that then we can take questions. So, so this is from our research that actually published in January of this year, and it was a focus on analytics and insights, but within the broader digital technology or digital transformation context. And you can see here with this sort of standard TBR bubble chart that we do put an emphasis on the individual vendors in the space. We have analysts that are covering all these vendors, and so we're building up our understanding of what's happening within analytics and insights and what's happening within the larger context of digital transformation by understanding what each one of these vendors is doing, how they're investing, what strategic choices they're making around talent and partnerships, and then, of course, their actual performance. So a couple of just sort of key data points to understand. We're seeing this area, analytics and insights services, continues to generate double-digit year-to-year growth, about 12% on average for everyone, in all 20 of the vendors in this particular benchmark. Increasingly, we're seeing that industry-specific platform offerings are connecting sort of end customer data from the front, middle, and back office. And so the IT services vendors and consultancies are better leveraging a broader data ecosystem or environment to generate those insights. And I think that's something that we saw particularly at Sapphire this year, this new emphasis on connecting the experience data and the operational data, the X's and the O data, as they said again and again. And I think we're seeing that is accelerating a lot of the trends around analytics and insights across all the IT services vendors and the consulting space. So we're going to revisit this particular group of companies and this particular subset of digital transformation again in July when we issue our next Digital Transformation Insights report that will look at A&I. So then another area, what we covered in February, was IoT. And so what we did here was kind of fantastic. So we have an IoT practice, and we have a guy named Ezra who's a guru around all things IoT. Not services, though, but IoT. And then we had Boz Christoph, who's our guru around digital transformation, and we sort of put them in a little cage match and said, okay, what's going to really happen here? Ezra, tell us what's happening with IoT. Boz, tell us what's going to happen with the services elements that combine with IoT. How are the offerings going to change? And so the report itself is fantastic. It brought out a few ideas here that I think are worth highlighting. There has been this progression from custom-built to bundled and packaged solutions. The second point there, the more we talked about this and the more we understood what was really happening with differentiation across the IoT landscape, it's the way to think about it is that it's a lot easier to know where to go when everything doesn't look the same. If you imagine, like, you're if any of you have ever been to Northern Virginia, you drive around Northern Virginia, everywhere in Northern Virginia looks exactly the same as everywhere else. Well, that sort of is what the IoT landscape looked like a little while ago. With the differentiation among the different services vendors in IoT and the different IoT providers, we can start to see now where clients really want to go. And then the last part there, number 3, the idea of the relationship between IT and OT. True, not necessarily new, but I think what is changing is it's sort of that relationship is compounded by an increasingly smarter, cleaner, better use of data. I think that's one of the important elements that has changed the IoT landscape, is the way that IT and OT folks within an organization are better manipulating and understanding the data they have. So with that, we will take a quick poll. And so the simple question, are your clients, this is basically taking giant steps, doing amazing things, going through that digital transformation, and their business models are disrupting themselves? Or are they trying stuff right now, seeing what might work? Or are they still considering, asking questions, not sure if this is all just hype? Or is it a mix of all three? And I really didn't want to put that last option in there because I know it's going to be 99% a mix of all of the above. But I do want to say from my own perspective, and hopefully you've already filled it out so I'm not going to skew the results, we're seeing so much in that middle right there where a lot of testing is going on and a lot of pilot projects being done, particularly in the CFO realm, particularly in finance, which is where it seems to be the easiest to create a business case and the easiest to prove value. And once you can prove value in the finance organization within an enterprise, then it's a lot easier to free up that additional cash to go into other areas. I think we've seen for a long time that digital transformation, for the last few years, digital transformation has often started with the customer experience side. It's where a lot of people think of digital transformation as sort of the heart of it. What we found over time is it's really become more what's happening in finance that's driving the actual change as opposed to the sort of the hype change. So with that, let's see what we got for results. Yeah, good. Excellent. Everybody's right where we're seeing everybody, right there in the middle, but still a good representation of folks that are seeing a mix from all the above. And that 8% or 9% roughly on taking big steps is about what we would expect to see based on a lot of the conversations and the stories, the use cases that we're hearing out in the field talking to people. And some of those stories are pretty incredible. Some of the use cases around truly disruptive change within enterprises, but it really has been few and far between. So with that, we'll look at a couple more areas of our research around digital transformation. This comes from our March report, our cross-vendor report, where we took a look at Accenture and IBM. We looked at their last few years of digital transformation for them, what they're currently doing, and then where we expect that they're going to be going. And again, these two companies cover, basically within TBR, we cover them across every single piece of our business, Accenture and IBM. So for us, we've got a vast amount of data and a vast amount of analysis on these two companies, but we wanted to put it in the context of digital transformation and sort of break them down into the pieces and then build it back up into a broader understanding of where they are and really where they're going. And we're seeing them do some of the same things, building relationships beyond the IT department, which is where both of these companies have typically played. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the customer zero thing and Accenture, that's another area where they're using their own experience of undergoing a digital transformation to then adopt more, as my colleague Boz says, more empathetic and actionable advice and consulting and offerings to their clients. So it's not just this is what we think is best, it's what we know is best because we've done it. And I think, with Accenture, of course, we see traditional, tons of methodology, repeatable frameworks, promote the relationships around innovation. They use the Accenture innovation architecture, and it's helping them grow, it's helping them market themselves better and grow into new markets, particularly around their relationships with the big technology vendors, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Amazon, the rest. IBM, in contrast, has really been able to leverage its own incumbent relationships with large enterprise IT clients and help them undergo this real seismic business change that's happening for them. IBM still has a phenomenal reputation, no matter what Wall Street might say about its performance. What we see is the change that's been happening there has been all heading in the right direction. They're gaining more traction with their solutions. They're gaining more market recognition of what they're bringing to the table around digital transformation, and so I think we're going to continue to see them accelerate. So why do we look at these two? Clearly, the size of these companies and the role that they have in the market. And again, TBR reports extensively on both of these companies. Quarterly earnings that cover their IT services, their cloud, their software, their telecoms practice, probably data centers. I'm not even sure. It's so fast how much we cover across these guys. So that was one reason to choose them. But in September, we will be doing another cross-vendor report, another Digital Transformation Insights cross-vendor report. And we're now at the decision point of, do we look at a leading consultancy against one of the leading pure systems integrators? Do we look at the largest partners of one of the large technology partners? Who's doing the most business with SAP and why? And how would you compare those vendors? Or maybe we'll look at who has been growing the fastest among all the companies that we cover across digital transformation. Again, we'll be putting it all within the context of digital transformation. And if I wasn't clear, if there was too much nuance there, I'm asking for feedback. If anybody has any thoughts on which would be the most valuable cross-vendor approach for us, we're certainly open to that discussion. So then the last piece from our research, and this comes from our April Digital Transformation Insights report that focused on digital marketing services. And I want to make really clear when you look at this, because it can be a little bit confusing. On the right where you see the CAGR and then you see A&A and WMC and the rest, that corresponds directly to the little key there on the left. So there's strategy, there's web mobile commerce, creative and branding, and advertising and analytics. This methodology, or this taxonomy, that we've been using to cover digital marketing services goes back about 6 years now. And so we've been very careful to develop a detailed data set around the companies, the 19 companies that we cover within this benchmark. And we've been very careful to ensure that the data is maintained even as we transition to more of looking at this from a digital transformation rather than solely a digital marketing services mindset. So we maintain the data set, we maintain the analysis and our understanding of how these companies are developing in these 4 buckets within digital marketing services, and fully aware everybody that's looking at this is saying, that's not how we define digital marketing services. I get that, but we had to pick a taxonomy that worked across the board, and this is the one we stuck with. So again, some data points that came out of the research that we published last month. We expect that this market is going to reach about $132 billion by 2023. The 19 vendors that I mentioned that are in this particular vendor set, their revenue grew at more than 22% a year in the last quarter of 2018, and we think they're obviously pretty well positioned. I don't have the same bubble chart as I did for Analytics and Insights, but you can imagine Accenture, IBM, Deloitte, those continue to lead the digital marketing services market. And really it's their established vendors that are paired with investments in creative capabilities, all wrapped around this marketing and an explosion really of marketing technologies. And I think, again, to get back to SAP, their acquisition of Qualtrics, which was the most important thing they talked about at Sapphire this year, is another area where I think we're going to see an impact on digital marketing services, is sort of that integration of operational data and experience data, and it's going to accelerate a lot of the trends that we're seeing in this space. And I hate to read out loud over a webinar, but I want to quote something that my colleague Boz wrote in this report, because I think it captures a lot of what's happening in the digital marketing services space. So the predictive analytics tools enable more tailored interactions and self-service capabilities, forcing services vendors to revamp their business models and value propositions to stay competitive. And now I'm going to make a comment here. A lot of what he's talking about there is the way that the larger IT services vendors and the consultancies have been able to pull themselves away from the traditional ad agencies. So then continuing adoption of technology-enabled content development and omni-channel platforms benefit vendors that can provide ongoing design and refinement support. However, the infusion of AI into AX requires experience in talent management, behavioral science, and data protection. So I'm going to skip the behavioral science part, but the talent management and data protection, which he brings up, goes right back to the beginning of this presentation, and we were talking about some of the trends that we're seeing through our discussions on our travels over the last 3 months. Talent is constantly a topic of conversation around not just reskilling, and not just recruiting the best talent, but finding the best leadership in these areas and finding the best people who can take wildly diverse teams in terms of their experience and what they're bringing to the table and manage them through a digital transformation engagement. Taking what's happening in DMS and taking it one level higher into the broader digital transformation context, this ability to lead and manage teams, again, that are bringing so many different things to the table and are structured very differently than traditional consulting or IT services teams, I think is one of the differences that we see between the companies that are doing really well and the companies that are struggling more. And then, of course, data protection, that last point from Boz, also gets at the idea around risk and how much as digital transformation unlocks or unleashes or enables greater, better, cleaner, faster manipulation of data, the risk side of that is elevated within a firm. And again, we're seeing and hearing increasingly that digital transformation engagements, the conversation is including a better understanding of and a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of what that does to the risk profile for the client as they go through that engagement. So with that, one last thing, we're going to be publishing shortly. I should have said this before, but when I mentioned IoT, this month, by the end of this month, we'll be publishing our next Digital Transformation Insights Emerging Technology Report, and that will be on quantum. And we probably should do a webinar on that, and maybe we will. I'm looking at Sarah thinking, okay, I got to get that on the books. We had a quantum piece, a special report that came out just recently by my colleague Stephanie Long, which is very good. It's a short read, and she basically used that as a way to preview the larger piece of analysis that's going to come out at the end of the month. And again, we'll be looking at quantum under the context of digital transformation, but also we'll be looking at quantum, both what it is and who are the vendors who are providing offerings around quantum computing, but then looking at it from the services angle and from the consultancies and the IT services vendors angle of what is the business case for deploying quantum, what's the business case for actually, more importantly, what is the business case for any consultancy or IT services vendor to actually create and try to run and sell a quantum practice. So that'll be all folded into the larger digital transformation context. And then we'll go through another report that will be focused on analytics and insights, and then the month following that, we're going to look at what we're calling voice of the customer, basically talking to an increasing number of clients who are going through these digital transformations, as much as possible to people at that 8 or 9% that you all identified in the poll, but it'll be an awful lot of people there in the middle who are sort of still in the experimentation stage and still trying to figure out how they'll scale. And we'll be looking at this data that you're seeing right here is about a year old, so we'll be taking a look at this spectrum and seeing what we need to update here, what's going to be different about this now that a lot more of the IT services vendors and consultancies have been better able to articulate what digital transformation is and what are the use cases and what's the value behind it. So we'll be rolling out, actually, I correct myself here, that actually comes out next month. By the end of June, we'll have that report out. So I came in at 30 minutes, I think, flew as fast as I could, and so with that, we will definitely switch to the Q&A. If you have some questions, throw them into the question and answer box here. The first one we got is, could you recap what Customer Zero refers to? You briefly mentioned, but would benefit from a bit more insight. So this, I don't know how new a concept this is, honestly. I think it sort of gets back to this idea of, you know, if a consultancy can say that they have done it before, that lends some credibility. But more importantly, if a consultancy or an IT services vendor can say, we've applied this emerging technology, or we've applied this innovation, or we've applied this new platform to our own selves, that lends an increased amount of credibility, of course, because then you can say, especially, and I'll be honest, for a client or for a consultancy like Accenture, which is nearly 500,000 people, the scale with which they've gone through, the scale to which they've been able to implement automation, been able to implement their MyWizard platform, is what is behind the confidence they have in rolling out MagConcerto and being able to provide it to clients both within the SAP environment and the Oracle environment, I believe. So that's the idea of Customer Zero. It means, you know, we're, again, eating our own dog food, drinking our own champagne. I think that's I think we're going to see an increasing, I know we're going to see an increasing number of IT services vendors and consultancies using themselves as their own use cases, at least initially, at least as they begin to roll out more offerings, specifically around digital transformation. It's going to get tricky, and here's where I've had conversations with some of the IT services vendors about, and the consultancies about, what do you do when you've got a client in the pharma or again, oil and gas company that says, you know, it's fantastic you're able to do this to yourself, however, you're not in our industry and it's very different. So I think that's where it's going to be the challenge to be able to translate the lessons and the imperfections, honestly, and how they were overcome in a consulting or an IT services space and a transformation there to another industry. So, so another question came in your observation, any common link between DT initiatives that struggle or fail? Thank you 1,000 times for this question, because this came up. I've been to a number of leadership councils in the last couple of months, 6 weeks or so, and I've heard client after client get up and talk about their own transformation, their own large, large SAP S/4HANA implementation, their own large transformation of some kind or another. And the common link for everybody is the humans. Nothing screws up a digital transformation more than the humans. And while I fully appreciate I was speaking with a gentleman with a consultancy yesterday who made the point that digital transformation isn't about technology; it's about human transformation. I get that, but it's the humans that screw things up more than anything else. The number of times clients say, "I wish we had spent more time up front on change management. I wish we had invested more in understanding the impact that this was going to have across the wide set of our employees, not the narrow set of just the IT service, the IT department, or not even the narrow set of a particular business line that was going through some transformation, but the broader impact on the organization as a whole." So that the flip side to the humans are what always screw it up is where you hear the success stories where people talk about the different ways that they've been able to create champions within an organization for digital transformation, bring people on board as early as possible, get people. It's what you typically expect. If you get buy-in at the top and buy-in from below, and you make sure that everybody is fully informed of what's going to happen to the best that you can predict it, then it's a better chance that a project's going to succeed or is going to succeed. And as soon as you cut back on the change management aspect, then the sooner it's going to fail. Again, this came up repeatedly in recent months, and I think it's something that we saw a couple of years ago when we were talking to some of the IT services vendors that were at the early stages of doing what were at the time digital transformation sort of pilot projects and implementations. And oftentimes when we would ask about change management, they would tell us, well, EY is doing that, or that's PwC's. They would fluff it off to a consultancy, not realizing that their own implementation, their own digital transformation engagement was really going to be dependent on how well the change management aspect worked. So that's between that lesson and leadership, just the incredible importance of finding the right people to lead on both sides, teams that are going through digital transformation, and oftentimes that means looking for folks beyond just the IT shop or beyond just the sort of standard typical management consultancy. It's much bigger than that. I think one other thing maybe I've seen in the last few months is a shift around what's happening to these digital transformation centers, or you could call them experience centers, or innovation hubs, immersion centers, whatever. I think we're seeing in the past, we've always looked at them from the view of which clients are going through and what are those clients doing, how is the talent managed at these centers, and then then how are the partner relationships managed. And by partner, I mean the SAPs and the Microsofts and the technology partners. So, and I'm talking about, just to throw some names out there, so PwC has experience centers, Deloitte has greenhouses, Capgemini has Applied Innovation Exchange, EY has Wave Spaces, Accenture has Innovation Hubs, Atos has the Business Transformation Insights Innovation Center. I messed that one up. It's BTIC, I know that. So at those kinds of centers, that we looked at it as a framework of sort of clients and talents and partner. What we've seen recently that's changed has been an increasing emphasis on IP, and what I mean there specifically is co-innovation with clients, but very much keeping the IP in-house, or keeping the IP with the consultancy or with the IT services vendor. And that's a subtle but important shift over the last maybe year or so. And then also co-investing in IP with startups. And again, that gets back to the risk element I talked about before. We're seeing an increasing number of these centers begin to be replicated on-site at clients. So clients are saying, we did a 2-day workshop. This was fantastic. We did a 3-month engagement around a particular pilot project. We developed some MVP. We're ready to go. But we want to have this capability on site. We don't want to be coming here to, Miami or to New York or to Dublin or wherever to do this. We want to do it in-house. So we're seeing a lot more of the IT services vendors and consultancies building out these centers, or building out replicants of these centers at their clients. And then finally, the last thing I would say on that, I've heard more stories recently about sort of what I would call highly networked engagements, where a global client is not brought to a single place, or a global client doesn't have a single team land on site. Instead, a global client has their own people at different centers, belonging to the same IT services vendor or consultancy, and the engagement happens sort of simultaneously, fully networked. I'm not saying that's new. I'm saying I think it's an idea that has taken a little while to really catch on, and I've only heard a couple of really good examples of it, but I think we're going to see that increasingly because of the way all of these vendors I've talked about have invested heavily in building out these centers. They're all networked, they're all global, so it's sort of the next natural evolution. So we got one more question that we'll take, and it's who are some of the service vendors with the most robust change management practices today? So it's a good question because conveniently, our management consulting benchmark will be coming out at the very beginning of next month, and so we're right in the heart of rolling out profiles on the 13 vendors that we cover in that space, and so that's the big four, IBM, Accenture, Capgemini, Bearing Point, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and I know I'm forgetting one or two others. But so within that benchmark, we do include organization and change as one of the service lines within management consulting, and so you can actually look through and see who has grown the fastest. I'm going to give you an incredible, and so I'll be honest, I have not looked at that data prior to the benchmark coming out beginning of next month, so I'm going to give you a highly biased answer, and it comes from all the conversations I've had. I think EY and PwC they were the consultancies we heard the most about a few years ago when we would talk to other IT services vendors who would mention them as being the ones who were providing the change management consulting, and we've seen them invest pretty heavily in their own practices, and I've had conversations with leaders at both of those firms who have talked about the way that change management is becoming a very different kind of offering than it's been in the past, to the point of, one of them in particular, one of those firms saying you didn't want to use the word change management at all anymore. So if I had to say who has the most robust, it's going to be those two, but again, that's a highly biased comment, and I guess you'll have to wait a month or so to see the data in our management consulting benchmark to see if I can back that up. We got time, so we'll take one more question that came in. What's your definition of hybrid cloud, and do you see an increasing or decreasing focus on hybrid dominating digital transformation deployments? So definition of hybrid cloud, I mean, I guess it's, it's public, it's private. I mean, I'm not going to, I know we have a definition somewhere in our cloud practice. We can send that along. I'm not sure I'm going to necessarily articulate it perfectly if I tried to. I can say that we increasingly hear two very different things with respect to cloud. And one is from some of the largest software vendors, the largest technology vendors, and even cloud providers, a belief that the market is heading towards that there's going to be an intersection point where public cloud becomes larger than private cloud, or even hybrid. And then we hear almost the exact opposite when we talk to clients about it, and when we talk to the consultancies. So the software vendors and the technology and the cloud providers seem to be seeing a market increasing towards public cloud, while the consultancies and the clients themselves seem to be seeing it going the other direction. I wish I was a cloud expert. That's a lie. I don't actually wish I was a cloud expert. I know what I know. We have a great cloud team that can cover cloud, and I'd strongly recommend you go to the site and find when we have another cloud webinar coming up. Alan Kranz runs that practice, and Cassandra Mushin and Megan McGrath are the two senior analysts on that team, and they're fantastic. Get their views on it. I'm telling you what I've heard in my conversations with the IT services vendors and the consultancies, and of course I'm hearing as well from their partners from the software and the technology side. So with that, and with 15 minutes left in the hour, we'll wrap it up. I think I set a land speed record for number of words in 45 minutes. But thank you all for coming. If you have any other questions, please send them in directly to us, or contact Sarah, let us know. And again, we're around all the time, always happy to chat and talk through this. If I said something completely crazy, definitely would welcome the feedback. So, Sarah, anything else before we go?
Yes. All right, everyone, please feel free to reach out to Patrick with any follow-up questions. His contact information is on the slide. If you have a few moments, we would appreciate if you could fill out the survey on your screen. A replay version of the webcast will be available after the event and will be sent out to you via email. To view a list of our upcoming and past webinars, please visit tbri.com. Be sure to join us Wednesday, May 22nd for Bringing the Best Talent and Technology in Management Consulting. Thank you and have a great day.